You're listening to eLearnChat, where talk is knowledge.
Hello and welcome to eLearnChat, our new podcast featuring prominent leaders, shakers and movers in the e-learning and training industry.
Good morning, everyone, or good evening. Wherever you are, we hope you're having a great day. This is eLearnChat episode number 58. And today we've got Dr. Patti Shank. She's joining us. She works with the eLearning Guild and a whole bunch of other things. With us also is Coline T Son Lee. Hey, Coline, how are you?
Hey, good morning, Rick. Good morning, everyone in the chat room and all of you viewing this archived version if you're not able to look at us live. And good morning, Patti. How are you?
I'm doing great, Coline. Nice to talk to you again.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and we have a little introduction plan, but Colleen's not feeling too well today. She got sick during the ice show, and we're not going to push her to speak too much. But Patti, I actually read Patti's bio. I was going to have Coline do the bio today, but we're going to keep her talking a little bit less. So all I can tell you is I can sum Patti up in about one word. As I went through about the 550 word, or actually it's more like 2,000 word bio, I said,
Oh, no.
all right, what are we going to do here? This is a long one. Patti's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I think
Thank
that's
you.
the one word. No, Patti does a lot of things. She is director with the eLearning Guild. You are working on special projects for the Guild, right?
Well, I am the director of research.
Research.
And I'm working on pulling together some research projects that will be especially good for practitioners of e-learning.
That's great.
And so stay tuned. We're going to have some awesome things for those of you who are practitioners and looking for things that will help you with your practice.
That is great. Patti's also a consultant, very well-known consultant, prolific writer. You've written a lot of books. And, it's funny. You know when you buy books and you don't really think about it and you don't really look at the author? I was reading your list of books and I go, I have all of your books.
Yay!
And it's funny because I didn't really equate, I know that book. Wait a minute, that's Patti. It's just really amazing how half the time you don't notice the author. When I was doing the Adobe camp, the design camp last Friday, one of the people there was Pariah Burke. He's a very well-known InDesign author. He writes a lot of stuff on multimedia. And he has very long kind of Jesus-like hair. He's a good-looking guy. And it was really funny because in the reviews, people later on, one of them said, really like the guy with the long hair. I had no idea who he was, but really like that guy. So yeah, you got to love reviews and stuff. But no, you've written some of my favorite books, and it's
Well,
funny
thank
as
you.
I was looking, I go, I didn't realize that was Patti.
Well,
These are books I've gotten several years ago, and just did not dawn on me.
Well, I have a funny story about the book. So at ASTD last week, I'm sitting and I'm talking with Coline, who I finally met for the first time in person. And there's a guy sitting across the table, and I'm giving Coline a copy of my Articulate book. And a guy across the table who was didn't seem interested in meeting me or talking to me or whatever. And I was handing the book to Coline. And the guy across the table said, I have that book. And I said, oh, well, that's great, super. And he said, you wrote that book? And all of a sudden he runs across the table, grabs it out of my hand, and he says, I want this book, and I want you to sign your name in it and sign it to me. And he said, oh, my God, I'm getting your name written in the book, and all of a sudden he's interested in talking to me. So that was
It's one of those moments. Yep.
He literally grabbed it out of Colleen's hand.
Oh, that's funny.
It was very funny. And then the guy next to him wanted the book as well, and we got into some big contentious arguments.
Oh, that's funny. Hey, Patti, if you can lower your mic a little bit.
You know what? I have.
Oh, now it's too low. Now I can't hear you.
Yes, I do. My husband regularly says to me, Patti, I'm standing right next to you.
Oh, how funny. You know what, Patti? Bring your mic back up a tad.
Okay.
There
I
we
will.
go. I was getting too much breathing noise on it, but I think we're better now.
Okay.
I don't want to lose your voice.
Okay.
All right. Speaking of voices, hey, Coline, how you doing?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good. I'm not on mute. I'm doing great.
Okay.
Colleen,
Yeah.
do you remember when that guy ran over?
Yes, I do. I recall because we were having a conversation about thought leaders, if I can recall clearly.
Oh no, yes, we
You
were
know,
talking.
speaking of thought leaders, we have a little cartoon. Here we go. I love this cartoon.
ASTD zebra.
The ASTD zebra with it, leading its thoughts.
Yes, leading its thoughts.
You know, when I saw this cartoon, it reminded me of an old bumper sticker I had years ago. I actually put it on. It was one of those car bumper stickers that somebody gave me as kind of a joke, but I actually really liked it. And it said, unless it had a picture of a sled dog at the front and all the other sled dogs behind it. And it said, unless you're the lead dog, the scenery never changes.
And it's true, and it's one of the things that we'll be talking about why training fails, because we use obnoxious phrases like thought leaders, and it's
Right. Meta talk.
whose thoughts are we leading?
Right. Well, that's what I used to say.
People don't want their thoughts led.
No, and unless you're some sort of radical Marxist, in which case that's okay. You lead people's thoughts because people are sheeple in that philosophy.
Right. We
So-
don't want to lead people's thoughts.
No.
People want to lead their own thoughts.
That's correct. That's correct. I would have rather hear the word an innovator, somebody who's innovating, somebody who's thinking, but a thought leader. That is so Accenture-like.
It's obnoxious.
Meta
is what
talk.
it is.
Meta talk. Yeah, and unfortunately,
And-
it's been accepted by so many people. Yes,
And
Colleen.
it's abused.
It is
it's-
abused because everybody's a
abused.
thought leader.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I don't like those terms, and I think those terms are exclusive, and exclusive means to exclude
Right,
others.
divisive in their own way.
Or
Well,
to divide others.
also, if everyone is a thought leader, then there is no one's thought to lead.
Right.
Leva says that a lot of people like not to have to think.
Well, I'm sorry, but you have to think.
Leva, can you explain that? Because I'm not sure what to think about that. No, just kidding.
So that's one of the things I'm hoping. I'd love for the folks who are out there who are listening. What do you think about the term thought leader? Is that an okay term? I just think that one of the things that we do in training is we come up with buzzwords, and those buzzwords have the tendency to put us on one side of an issue and put others on the other side, and they divide us. And I think we should stop that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where thought leader originated. I tend to think it probably was something like an Arthur Andersen, Accenture, GE, one of those companies that tends to do a lot of meta talking. Possibly came from there. It's used everywhere. It's used in just about everything. I'm a dog trainer and I'm a thought leader in dog training.
Right.
It's kind of interesting. Well, that kind of brings up the old joke of the person who is looking at a fish tank, and he walks by and he sees this person controlling the fish with his mind. He's moving his eyes, and the fish are moving right along with it. And the person says, "How do you do that?" And he says, "Superior mind always controls inferior mind." And the guy goes, "Really?" So the guy leaves, and the second guy is looking at the fish. 5 minutes later, he's going, "Superior mind always controls inferior mind." Anyway, with that ado, let's move on. So,
Okay.
why does training fail? That's a good topic because it's something that nobody really likes to admit too much. That our training didn't go too well. Now you brought a little bit of a slide deck with you.
I did.
And I can start with this first one right here.
Yep. Let's start with the first one. I came up with some things that I think we're doing wrong, and that I think possibly if we don't realize what we're doing, we're going to get in some trouble really, really quickly. So let's go through some of the ones that I thought maybe we could talk about today. Let's start with the first one.
Oops.
You want to put up the first slide?
The why training fails?
Yep.
Okay, here we go.
Here's the big one. People have other preferable. First slide.
Oh, this one. Sorry.
Yep. Next one.
Next one? Oh, I
Yep.
must have them.
Yeah, that's it.
This one here. Here
Yeah.
we go.
Yep. So people have other preferable, better, easier ways to learn. And things like other people that they work with, who can get right to the point. A lot of our training fails to meet their specific needs, and so they can go directly to people that can answer their direct questions. They can go on Twitter and ask specific questions and get specific resources. They can go online. They can go to blogs. They can Google search. There's just a million ways to learn these days. The internet has opened up just tons of ways for people to learn. Rick and Coline, if you, like, I don't know, I've been having troubles with doing some stuff on Excel lately. And I went on Skype and asked my friend Steve, and I said, hey, are you really good with Excel? And he said, I'm fantastic. So I asked him a question. He said, I need to see your Excel spreadsheet. And I used Join Me. I showed him my Excel spreadsheet. He told me what to do, and I fixed it. I didn't need an Excel class. I just fixed it.
Right.
Immediately. So, I'd love to ask the two of you, or anybody who's in the audience, what kind of a problem have you had recently, and how did you fix it? Chances are it wasn't a training class. What about you guys? How did you fix a problem you had recently?
I can share that exact same example, Patty. After I came back from ICE, I had done some video recording. I did some interviews while I was there, and I wanted to jump right into editing the videos. And I knew there are two people who can help me with that, and that's Rick and Jeff, who's also in the chat room. I sent Jeff a direct message. I said, hey, I have some video I need some help with. We got on Skype. It was like 1 a.m. his time in Australia, and we spent about 2 hours, and he walked me through this step-by-step how to get up and running with video editing. And it was Skype and sharing my desktop like you just mentioned, and I didn't have to take a class. I mean, it was perfect, and it was easy and quick and dirty.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. And it's funny. When I run into things I need to do, like for example, I'm learning WordPress. I've done web development for a long time, but I've never used WordPress. So I went online. Well, actually, a couple of things. One, I found a guy on Twitter who knew how to install a specific framework we were using. And in 1 hour, that framework was installed, and we actually had it right. We just thought we were missing things. And the other thing was, I can go on lynda.com and take training. And I can take whatever lesson. I don't need to go through the whole thing because most of it's pretty...
Right, you can find the direct
lesson. I can find the 5 minutes I need, and life is great.
Right.
And again, that's the same idea, that it's so available that you don't have to go through 100 hours of rigorous training when you can find bits and pieces. Now, there is something risky about that.
What's that?
And that is that when we claim to be experts, and this is an issue that you've probably run into, a lot of people claim to be experts who barely know the tools. They know it superficially because they've gone through 25-minute lessons here and there, but they really don't know the tools. They know how to work around certain things. But knowing the tool and becoming an expert are two different things.
Right.
But I think that's where when we know who our network is, who our personal learning network is, and they have established a certain amount of credibility, we can determine or evaluate who to go to and ask questions.
Sure.
Right, that's true. And well, I'll give you an example of that. I have a friend in Virginia who, when she gets stuck in Articulate, sends me an email, asks me a question. 9 times out of 10, I know the answer, but when I don't, I just tell her, she may have a lot of times her questions are how to get something to work on an LMS. Well, I don't pretend to know the answer to that. So sometimes I can help her, sometimes I can't. Usually if it's an instructional design, like which one of the engage interactions I should use, a lot of times I can answer that, but sometimes she'll have some tricky LMS questions. I don't know the answer to that, so she'll post it up on the Articulate forums.
Yep.
So I'm not an expert in that. or she'll put it on Twitter and somebody will help her with that.
Right.
But there's rarely, I mean, these are all the things we're talking about are things that, is your training department going to help you with that? So that brings me to,
I have a
go ahead.
question somebody put out there in the chat room, Diane. And she says, so does that mean learners tend to learn regardless of the quality of the learning event? And that would be, I guess, tangential to what Rick said earlier in terms of there's bad stuff out there and we have to be careful who we reach out to get information from.
Well, I think it means a number of things. One is, go to the next slide if you will.
Here we are.
I think I don't know if this answers the question or starts, it begins to answer some questions and starts to bring up other issues. I think trainers in general are not in touch with what's going on with the people out there in their workforce. I think one of the things that training folks need to do and don't do is to go out and find out what people out there in the work world are doing and need to learn about, and they need to find out what it is that people need to learn. I remember doing some training with Morgan Stanley a long time ago. We were teaching HTML and web development and instructional design. And I remember one person in the training class saying, I don't have a clue what the people I'm training do. And that's a problem. If you don't know what your people do, how can you train them? You only know your content. You need to know what they do, or you can't effectively support them.
No, that's a real good point. And I think part of that is the way the organizations are structured. I remember back when I started working in IT often reported to finance, a really not good place to put IT. IT should really report either to the president or to an operational group. Same happens with training, where you have the learning groups, I should say the training groups, reporting to HR, which is not really where you want them, because HR doesn't know much about the business, if at all. They really should be reporting to operational groups more often than not, where the training is directly related to the bottom line profits of the organization. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, how is it that you and I as trainers can support what people need if we don't know what they do?
You can't. You can't.
And we can't just be pushing content at people and pushing instruction at people. I would say that if that's what we're doing for a living, we're doomed to fail. Big time doomed to fail. So you and I have to be going out there and asking people what they do, what it is they need help with, what kind of things, what kind of information they're looking for. That's what we need to be doing for a living, not just pushing content. And so if someone is telling you, well, I've been looking for WordPress information and I don't know if this content's any good, we need to look into that. We need to be purveyors of quality information. I mean, that needs to be part of our work. Coline and I were talking about that yesterday, that needs to be more of our job description.
Also, I think what happens is when you go to a training department looking for quote-unquote training, the training departments feel that they have to provide all the training.
They don't.
And they don't. I mean, what if you just recommend somebody, hey, go to this website, they have a really good tutorial.
Right. And that needs to be more of what we do for a living. In fact, I'm not sure that we need to be delivering all the training. In fact, I don't think we should be. You know,
Right.
I think, you know, if my husband was telling me a lot of people, he's an engineer, and a lot of people at his work need MATLAB training. It's been a constant request. And they're not getting MATLAB training where he works, and they need it. Should they be developing MATLAB training? Well, I don't know if they should or they shouldn't, but if a great percentage of the engineers need it, then that's a need that needs to be filled.
Sure.
I have a couple of great questions in the chat room. One of them, I guess it's more of a statement. Often the T&D department gets orders from training from department managers who aren't really in touch with business needs.
No.
And it's usually a knee-jerk reaction to someone else's complaint. That's the first comment. And then here's another question. How can we promote the importance of knowing learners when organizational leaders want to push content?
Well, that's a huge problem. That's a major disconnect, and that's a system problem. And that's a huge issue. One of the problems that happens in training organizations is that training is treated like a content problem, and training is a system problem. And what I mean by system problem is that it's a performance issue. People can't do their jobs. They need things so that they can do their work. And training needs to be positioned as a system performance issue, and not just a content problem. And so, I mean, this is such a big issue, and I'd love to address it. What I need is my slides and to be able to talk about this at the system issues that go into training and performance. It's part of incentives and management and how you set up optimal performance.
In fact, I'm on your next slide right now, which kind of talks a little bit about that.
Well, yes, it does, and that is that we push courses when what things that are needed is the design of performance solutions, and often what's needed is the things that are needed so that people can optimally do their jobs. And often what's needed is a system approach to performance, and that includes performance support, optimal training, good management, the optimal incentives. A lot of times tools and performance support so that they can do their job. A lot of times when I go in to work with people in organizations, people don't even have the right tools to do their jobs. And then they're being told to be given training to do their jobs when they're already trained to do their jobs, but they don't have the tools to do their jobs. They don't have the performance support that they need to do their jobs. They aren't managed correctly to do their jobs. The incentives that are in place are anything but what they need to do their jobs. And you can give them all the training in the world, but they can't. But you can train them till they're blue in their face, but everything else is skewed in the opposite direction to do the job. And unless you put all the other things in place, doing the right job is not going to happen. And training's not the right intervention. And you have to hire the right people. And if you hire the wrong people to do the job, you can't train them to do the right job. It's just there are performance factors that need to be in place in order for people to do the right job. And so, you're asking training people to do the impossible.
Right.
So that's my soapbox on that.
And you're sticking to it.
I'm sticking to it. And I can explain that in a lot of detail with images to support that. But it's just you're asking training to do what it cannot do.
True. And especially if training is not operational, then they really can't support what your needs are because they don't understand the actual underlying need.
Right. And there's a foundation of things that support performance. Training alone cannot make that happen.
Yeah, I've blogged about that, where if you don't understand the business you're in or you work for, you're never going to be a good trainer in that business.
Right.
If you work in a finance company and you don't understand the basics of finance, if you work in a bank and don't understand how credit happens, how loans happen, you're probably not going to understand how to teach it to anybody.
Right.
If you're in a manufacturing company, you're an engineer. If you need MATLAB but don't understand how to use it, that's a tool you need. So you have to start back at square one. What tools do you need? Is it going to make your job better? And what do you do with it?
Well, one of the things that I think is critical for all training people is they need to work in the operations parts of the business and understand that business in order to support it with all the training that they do. If you don't understand your business, if your training doesn't support the business end of the business, if you don't understand the business like the operations do, people do, you can't support your business.
And there's another issue. You have no clout if you don't understand the business because everybody knows you don't.
That's right.
And that becomes an issue where training is relegated to, let's call those bozos over there because we need some training done. But it doesn't mean that they have any respect for the training department because they know. Now, there are exceptions. There's some very good training departments out there who I can think of several that we work with right now that have people in operations who really know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of the trainers came from operations, which I find really interesting.
Yeah.
And they've transitioned as instructional designers who've worked in the field or actually on the phones or as adjusters or whatever they did, so they actually understand the process.
Well, and actually we make fun, it's funny to me that we make fun of people who came out of operations or who came out of other places. Those folks have street creds, you can learn instructional design, you can learn training. If you understand the operations, you've got a leg up on other people because other people will listen to you.
Right.
And anybody who came into our training department, I come from healthcare. Anybody who came into our training department who didn't understand the operations of healthcare had to go back into our operations and see how that all worked, and needed to understand it. Because if they didn't, nobody would believe they understood what it took to run a orthopedics department, or a pediatrics department, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, you don't hear too much about, for example, management training anymore. What they do is they put somebody who's fresh out of school maybe, or maybe with a little bit of experience, and they work them through 5 or 10 departments within an organization. They manage, they're there maybe a year and they get a really good idea of what every department does.
Yeah.
So when they go back into the training department, they now understand what the business needs are, and then they can solve some of those problems or provide a solution, or maybe even catch what some of the issues are and help solve it before it becomes a real problem.
Right.
But some organizations, it's hard to even define what the business needs are, because if you look at their, company policies or what their goals or objectives are, they're so obscure you can't even squeeze anything out of it.
But I think that's more from an HR perspective rather than operational perspective.
I mean, at the end of the day, we all want to make money, give good customer service. That's essentially what the the two key factors are.
And build products in China that work.
Right.
Sorry.
You know what I'd like to show? I'd like to show Jane Hart's small surveys, because I think these are really telling, and I think that.
Okay, let's see. I think these are these two, right? Am I in the right ones?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm waiting for them to come up.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
There's anywhere from a 1 to 5 second lag.
Yeah, it's okay. So Jane Hart did some surveys with companies, and I think these are mostly in Europe. I'm going to give you a second just to take a look at this survey so that you can. So the question that she asked here was, how important are the following ways for you to learn? And I think she's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 ways to learn. And I'm going to give you a moment for you to take a look at this, and then I want to talk to you about it.
Now, I'm not sure how readable it is to most of it. From on my screen, it's a little bit small because I've got
so
preview windows.
I can
talk about it for you. So
What I
she
can
only had
also do-
131 answers, and that means that the survey was fairly small, which means that it may or may not be very generalizable. So she got 131 responses to this survey, and I'll read down the left side for you. So she asked 131 people, how important or useful or valuable are the following ways to learn for you? And the ways to learn were company training, self-directed study, internal company documents, internal job aids, collaborative working with your team, general conversations and meetups with people, personal and professional networks and communities, external blogs and news feeds, content curated from external sources, and Google search for web resources. She found, well, just under half of the respondents think that company training, which includes face-to-face workshops and e-learning, is only somewhat important. And nearly 20% found that it was not important at all. Now, what that means is that 70% of the respondents felt that company training was either somewhat important or not important at all. And that's pretty devastating for those of us in this field. And around the same number of respondents, around 70%, rated self-directed study as very important. 90% of respondents thought that collaborative working with your team is essential or very important. And around the same number said conversations, feeds, personal and professional networking, curated content, and using Google to search the web were rated extremely important. Very, very few people considered those items as not important.
Now, I'm assuming that a lot of those people were probably professionals, because if you go to most companies where you go to the rank and file, which does a much more repetitive job, they're not very self-directed. Whereas the professionals will usually be much more self-directed. So it's sort of interesting. I'm curious what the sampling of people was. I would assume they sounded more professional from the nature of what they were probably doing.
Let me pull up her. Hold on a second here. I want to pull this up from what she said. See if I can ferret that out. I can't ferret it out from that. Let's go to the next one right after that.
Okay, here we are. We're on the next one.
Okay. What's interesting on this next one is that she then rank ordered the things that in the order that she said that people found them to be of value. And company training was at the very, very bottom. The top one was collaborative working with your team. And personal and professional networks was the next one. Company training at the very, very bottom.
Now, Patty, that's interesting. That brings up a good point. Collaborative working with your team or learning with your team. If you have a trainer that has come from the trenches, who understands the business models, the operational issues, that trainer adds, like you said earlier, a lot more credibility to the process, which makes the training much more impactful, which is almost like collaborating. The trainer becomes a mentor in many ways. But you don't find that often. And that's one of the losses that we find in training. When you have trainers like that who really know or have been in the trenches, they've been bruised and battered in the trenches, they have tricks, they know techniques, they know what to do, and they know how to do it. That's the kind of trainer that usually is the most successful in a corporation. So I think that kind of leads to that one too in that survey. Let's go back to the survey.
I find this stuff scary and telling, and it says something to me that I think that, well, what it says to me is we'd better be doing more of finding out what people need and changing our role to be finders and keepers of information and helpers, and being the kind of trainers that do exactly what you just said, Rick, that we'd better be those people that are good resource finders, that are good at finding things that people need, and less content developers. Mm-hmm. I think that we had better show this survey to and I mean, there's other information out there. This just came out very recently. There's other information that shows that what you and I do as a regular gig is not cutting it. Can you show the slide that shows, with the exception of compliance, regulatory, and safety training, we're facing extinction? Because I'd like to talk about that.
Let me see. Which one is that one? Do you know what that was in the deck?
Yeah, it's the one right after the
is it this one? With the exception of, here we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. The reason I ask is what I see is very Greek, because I have little teeny weeny screen images.
Right. I think that this is what we're doomed to, because we have to do this kind of stuff for a living. We're mandated to do this stuff. But is this really what we want to do? Is this what we want to be imposed on? I mean, this is what we have to do for a living because it's imposed on us. But here's the thing. People are finding their own information, but I think that you and I need to, and the rest of us out there need to find a new niche. And I think that niche needs to be helping people find the good resources. What do you think? Based on what I'm saying?
Well, I agree, because look at Twitter. If you go to Twitter, aside from being a social network where people kind of screw around and do nothing worthwhile, there's actually a lot of worth in Twitter where you can get a lot of information and people share a lot. And for example, you can go on Twitter and say, hey, how do I do this? Or has anybody done this? Or has anybody read this? Has anybody seen this? And within minutes, usually you get some response. Now, I did find on Twitter that if you ask anything arcane or a little too technical, it just gets ignored. But on the whole, if you have something that they can lead you to a document, a video, a book, anything, it's pretty easy to get information. Twitter's just one example. You can go on Facebook, you can go on any network, or you can call someone who you might know who might lead you somewhere. But you're right. I think in the nature of our industry right now, the more we lead people to knowledge, because you can't claim to have all the knowledge. Very few people do.
Right.
I mean, there are people who know everything, but they're few and far between. If you can lead people to a good source of knowledge. Now, for example, one thing a lot of companies don't really spend a lot of time on are really good knowledge bases, where you can go and find information. whether it's
Right.
video, audio. And, when they do is you have help systems that just give you a ton of verbiage. Okay, now let's take the average 20 to about 30-year-old. They don't read much.
Right.
So you're losing that whole set of knowledge on those people because they're not going to read it. So how do we add more video to it? How do you add more audio content?
How do we help the learners and the SMEs out there get their knowledge out? It's really interesting to me that I think it was last week we had a conversation on Chat to Learn about working with subject matter experts. And it was disturbing that to me that while we seem to be in favor of learner-generated content, we don't seem to be in favor of subject matter expert-generated content. Do you see the disconnect there?
Yeah.
Now,
And partly that goes back to the, I think, premise that if everyone is an expert, then no one's an expert. And so nobody has any real clout as an expert anymore.
Right.
We tend to promote mediocrity versus knowledge.
Right.
Just an observation I've noticed throughout the years that how many people have a year of experience in the field and go out and claim they're a consulting expert?
Right.
When they've seen nothing.
And well, see, in my view of the world, let's help our real subject matter experts. Let's find the tools for them to get what they know out there. And I just see different roles for us as training folks. If we dig our heels in and insist upon traditional roles for training people, we will be relegated to being the regulatory,
right? The compliance folks, yes.
Yes, because that's going to be the roles that are left for us. The tools for e-learning are getting easier, and so some of that's going to be gone, and we're going to be stuck with the stuff we don't want. We need to relook at our roles. We need to sell the system orientation of knowledge dissemination. Our roles are changing.
Well, it's an interesting point too, and take it back a step further. It starts in academia, which provides programs of instructional technology and design which are very limited. They don't have much real-world consequence to them, and they don't teach things that anybody really ever does.
Mm-hmm. True.
We've worked with a lot of entry-level instructional designers, and it's like, all right, kid, sit down. Let's talk about life. And
someone earlier in the chat said something to the effect of, when you're in college or at school, I guess pedagogy teaches you everything that you might need, versus sandragogy or adult learning, where they teach you things that you need to know.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, another thing that's been coming up recently is, and I've been seeing this on Twitter, blurbs here and there, which I think is actually rather idiotic, and that is, you cannot put ROI on training. Really? Okay, then fine, you have no job. Because if anybody who says that has never, like I said, I actually tweeted this one out, if you haven't paid a payroll, if you don't pay your vendors, if you don't generate a profit in a company, you will not have a company. You won't have resources to work with. You won't have any ability to buy the products you need so that you can espouse or expound upon useless dribble. ROI is important. It may be calculated differently, but if you don't know what your return on investment is, in other words, how much money you're spending in order to get something out of it. We're not training people just because we're just great people. You're training them because, look, I've always said for years, no company trains anybody unless they have to.
Right.
They don't want to spend the money. It's a
cost.
Exactly.
Right.
And
it's a cost.
And it's hard to get financial types to understand that cost can also be an investment, especially in a world where, and it's a two-way street, companies and employees are very fluid. Companies lay off very quickly, employees move very quickly. So that makes it very hard to invest a lot of time, effort, and money into people that may not be there in a year. And
The thing about it is, Rick, is that a lot of people spend a lot of time debating ADDIE versus RID or ROI versus Kirkpatrick or whatever. And while all these debates are going on, the employees or the learners or whatever you want to call them, they're out there getting the information they need to get the job done.
Right.
Right. And not from us, for the most part.
That's right. They're trying to find people in the company who know what they need or can get it done. In fact, another issue is, and this is something we've all run into, the training departments take too long to respond. They're not just in time.
Right.
The business needs, one thing that happens, and this is something that we've probably all run into, let's say you're developing training. You're developing a set of software simulations for brand new systems that come out. Let's say you're a hotel chain. You're developing this whole new reservation system. So you've got to train your people on it. You spent a year developing something that by the time it's done has been outdated 3 times. You're not keeping up with the flow of what's happening in the business.
Right.
I believe it was Hilton years ago that created this whole Star Trek. I mean, literally, they had actors from the original Star Trek. This is probably over a decade ago or longer. They spent something like $1.5 million creating this great training. And by the time it rolled out, it was already 6 months obsolete.
Right.
Well, guess what happened? For a long time, they didn't do any training like that. Now I think they're back to doing just good training rather than, you don't need to create a movie for that kind of stuff. They were doing a motion picture.
We expend all this energy talking about whether it should be a game or it should be this, sometimes just adequate, but on time and when people need it, I don't know. Sometimes when I see what training folks spend time talking about, it's mind-boggling because we're not talking about the right things. And yes, if we had unlimited funds and unlimited time, it would be wonderful to talk about those things.
Oh, we'd be having fun.
Really, absolutely. but mostly we just need to make a difference. And I was worried that my phone would ring during this time. And
you can always answer and say, "Hello, you're on national television."
But so I was thinking, I made myself a list of things that we need to do. One is, the most important things are, one, we need to understand the businesses we're in, and we need to add value to our individual businesses each and every day, whatever that is. We need to do valuable work. We need to sell the business results of what we're doing. And we need to sell it not to our training managers or our CLO, but higher than that. We need to be involved outside of the training department. Each and every one of us needs to be involved in committees and things that are outside the training department. We need to stop whining. Just stop whining. Get involved in quality improvement. Get involved in finances. Get involved in anything outside of the training department.
You know, Patti, I'll tell you, if you have $500 to join, let's say you work in a manufacturing company, and you have $500 to join ASTD or to join APICS, the American Production Inventory Control Society, join APICS.
Yes, join APICS.
Because that's going to help your career.
Absolutely. You should have certifications outside of training.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Make sure that you are involved in efficiency and effectiveness measures outside of training. And just look for adding value and value outside of training. Training by itself is not necessarily valuable. Look, what does your business consider valuable? Look, ask people at higher levels of the organization, what does it mean? What is value? So if you're in healthcare, what's valuable? What is valuable in patient care? What is valuable in manufacturing? How do you add value there? And make sure that what you do adds value right there.
Well, there's another issue, and that's what that's and you know what that comes
take
into.
a look on Twitter. What are the people in your organization tweeting about? How do you add value there?
Right. Right. And you know what? It's interesting because
get outside of our heads inside of training, because training is not necessarily valuable just because it's training.
No, and
just
training
it's instruction.
And training departments have a bad reputation.
My background was in quality improvement and in performance and in metrics and in statistics. And learn to think mathematically, learn to think in numbers, learn to think in business sense. We have to.
And the other thing is, a lot of training departments, they're known only for.
What are people saying who are on the chat? What do they think of? Do you think we're talking crazy?
No, I think they're in agreement with what we've been talking about throughout the entire conversation. Now, Rick, you were trying to say something earlier?
Oh, only that.
Have I lost internet connection?
No, I don't think Patti can hear us. Patti, can you hear me?
I think she might have some problems hearing us.
Rick, I'm turning to my laptop to see if I would you.
Okay,
would you
can you hear me? Can you hear me right now?
Net connection.
Patti, can you hear me? Hello, hello. There she goes. Okay.
I'm going over to my laptop. I think I've lost my internet connection.
Okay.
Okay. Actually, we have her video, but I think she's not getting our audio.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
So let me. I'm going to hang up, and I'm going to give her a call right back. So here we go. And then we're going to wrap up the show pretty soon because we've been going for almost an hour.
Can you see me?
Yes. Can you hear us now? Can you hear us, Patti?
I can't.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
No.
You don't hear us.
I'm going to. I'm going to restart my computer.
Okay, Patti.
I don't think she can hear us.
I think we lost her.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give her a moment to try to get back. Anyway, what I was saying is also that training oftentimes is only known as a compliance operation, and everybody just adores compliance courses.
Yeah.
And really, if you think about it, if the government wasn't so involved in every aspect of our lives, compliance wouldn't be that much of an issue. Yeah. That's really a result of lawyers and government. There's not really much need for compliance, except maybe in some rare cases. So,
yeah, and that's something that Patti and I talked about yesterday, and that is the face of training as we know it would be quite different if it weren't for compliance and regulatory training.
Yeah, that should be
I think
fun.
a lot of organizations are stuck in a rut because of how they believe they need to execute compliance training versus being more creative and and stretching themselves in more creative ways of getting training done. I think they believe it has to be done this way, and that's the only way we know. That whole state of being, this is how we've always done it.
Patti, can you hear us now?
I'm here. I'm on my laptop.
Okay, you can hear me?
I can.
Okay, cool. It's funny, your video was always good, but the audio seemed to have gone out.
Well, I lost you. My internet connection went away on my laptop, on my desktop, so I'm here on my laptop.
Interesting, because your video was always good.
Okay.
It's just that the audio, I could tell you weren't hearing us.
Huh.
But anyway, guess what, Patti? We are almost at the end of the show. Actually, we've exceeded the end of the show by about 20 minutes, but that's okay. We're having a good time. We need to have you back on and get into more stuff because there's a lot more to talk about.
Yeah. Some final words, Patti?
I hope I've convinced some folks that what we're doing needs to change, because if it doesn't change, I think on some level we're going to become extinct.
And you know what happens to dinosaurs?
That's bad news. Yeah.
It's bad news. They become oil.
Yeah. Oh, terrible. Or maybe that's good. I don't know. Not good for us.
I saw a comedian once, Dick Shawn, a very, very good comedian. He passed away, I don't know, probably a decade ago. And he was talking about the history of the world and how we actually all evolved and why dinosaurs disappeared overnight. He said it was all massive constipation, followed by a big bang, and there you have oil. That was, and you know what? It was as plausible as any other theory out there. So, anyway, hey Patti, it was an absolute pleasure having, and for all you guys in the chat room or watching the show in the recording, I told you she was awesome.
Yeah, we
Thank
had
you.
a huge turnout today.
Well, great, and it was a fun show, and we didn't even get to all your slides. I think we missed about 5 of them.
That's okay.
But we will get to them another time, and I think we definitely have to have you back on and pursue this a little bit more. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we haven't even talked about yet.
Sounds good. We'll talk about something controversial and different next time.
Controversial. I
More
like
controversial.
that. More controversy. Sounds great. Hey, and everyone in the chat room, thank you for being there. And if you're watching the recording, please subscribe, and we'll see you next week on eLearnChat.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. You have a great one.